Can you make him speak?
My son won't speak, the cowboy pleaded, and the obese woman did what no one could. Callum Hale had not heard his son's voice in 3 years. He had heard everything else. The sound of the boy's boots on the porch steps each morning. The particular way he breathed when he was reading. The soft exhale that meant he had fallen asleep in the chair by the fire again. Callum knew every sound his son made except the one he needed most. That was why he was at the Saturday market in Millhaven. Asking again. Quietly. The way he had been asking for 8 months. The Saturday market was loud and bright and had no particular use for Wren. She knew this the way she knew most things about herself, quietly, without bitterness, as simple fact. 2 vendors had already done the familiar thing that morning, eyes traveling the length of her before the polite refusal, so she stopped asking and found her own space between the grain cellar and the fence post and arranged her 2 jars of preserves with steady hands. The basket beside her feet shifted. Juniper had opinions about baskets and was not keeping them to herself. The landlady's voice was still sitting in Wren's chest like a splinter. End of the week. I am sorry, Wren. I cannot hold the room any longer. End of the week was 4 days away. She straightened her jars and kept her face easy and did not let anyone at this market see what 4 days meant to her. She was reaching for the second jar when she saw the boy. He was standing completely still in the middle of the market while everything moved around him. Not lost. Not frightened. Contained, like stillness was something he had chosen so many times it had become the only place he felt safe. Perhaps 7 years old. His coat was clean and carefully buttoned. Someone loved him enough to button his coat. 2 boys had found him. They were not using fists. Children that age rarely did when something quieter was available. One had gone slack-jawed, arms hanging loose, eyes blank and empty, performing the boy's silence back at him. His friend was bent double laughing. The contained boy did not react. Did not flinch. His chest rose and fell in the shallow, careful way of someone who had learned to make themselves very small and very still and wait for it to be over. Wren recognized that breathing. Her husband Edgar had breathed like that. 6 years she had learned what that stillness meant and what it cost a person when someone grabbed them before they were ready to come back. She put down her preserves and walked over. She was not a small woman and she did not move like one. The 2 boys saw her coming and something in her steadiness unsettled them more than anger would have. She did not look at them. She knelt to the boy's level, knees finding the packed dirt, and looked only at him. Fine morning to ignore people who aren't worth your attention. The boy's eyes moved to her face. Slow and deliberate. The way you look at something when you are genuinely trying to understand it. He looked at her the way he had not looked at the 2 boys. The way he perhaps had not looked at anyone in a long time. Then his eyes dropped to the basket. Juniper shifted inside it and something moved at the very corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The beginning of the memory of one. The 2 boys drifted away without being addressed. Excuse me. The voice arrived sharp and prepared. A well-dressed woman, Margaret Hargrove, stood with her arms folded and her chin lifted, looking at Wren the way she looked at things she had already decided about. The look traveled slowly, down and back up, said everything it intended to say without a single additional word. Look at yourself before you step forward like that, Margaret said. What gives you the right to involve yourself with this child? Wren straightened to her full height and said nothing, kept her face the way she kept her hands, steady. Margaret was not finished. She had an audience now and she knew how to use one. Bad enough the child is how he is, she continued, voice rising, feeding on the crowd forming around her. Everyone in this town knows what Dr. Aldrich said. The boy is unreachable. He belongs in the asylum at Hargrove County. The only cruelty here is keeping him out in the world where he distresses himself and everyone around him. She looked at Wren with pointed precision. The last thing he needs is strangers pushing themselves into things that don't concern them. The market had gone very quiet. Wren looked at the boy. He had not moved. His chest was doing that careful shallow breathing again. She kept her eyes on him and said nothing to Margaret at all. My son's silence is not your theater, Margaret. Callum came through the crowd the way men came through crowds when they had decided something. Broad-shouldered, unhurried. The particular quietness of a man who had learned that raising his voice cost more than it returned. He had been 20 feet away. He had watched everything. He looked at Margaret Hargrove with a steadiness that made her go rigid. Dr. Aldridge examined my son for 40 minutes and delivered his verdict over coffee at my table, Callum said quietly. I heard what he said. I showed him the door. That decision was mine to make, and it remains mine. Margaret opened her mouth. And this woman, Callum continued, his eyes moving briefly to Wren, was doing something I have not seen anyone in this town do in 8 months. She knelt down to my son's level and spoke to him like he was worth speaking to. I would ask you to consider, he looked back at Margaret, what that says about the rest of us. Margaret pressed her lips together. She did not speak again. The crowd shifted and looked away in the manner of crowds who had wanted a spectacle and received instead something that made them uncomfortable about themselves. Callum turned to Wren. He had dark eyes and a face that had been carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. He looked at her the way his son had, directly. As if actually seeing her. 8 months, he said. I have been asking this town for 8 months for someone who understands that silence is not the same as absence. He stopped, looked at his son, then back at her. I just watched you understand it without being told. He took his hat off, held it against his chest. My son hasn't spoken in 3 years. Not one word. Doctors gave up. I haven't. His voice dropped. Can you talk to a boy who has never answered? Please. I am asking for your help. Wren looked at the boy. He was watching her basket with the focused patience of someone who had learned to want things without asking for them. My cat comes with me, she said. Something shifted in Callum's face. The first movement in it that wasn't grief. The ranch has mice, he said. Consider it a professional arrangement. She took his hand. For days until the room was gone. She walked toward his wagon like she had chosen this freely. Like it was not the last door available. Like she was not grateful down to her bones that it had opened at all. The boy fell into step beside his father without being asked. Just before they reached the wagon, he looked back once. Not at Wren. At the basket. The house held together, but just barely. The table was clean, yet one chair sat slightly pulled out, like no one had bothered to push it back in days. A folded shirt rested on the banister, unmoved. Nothing was dirty. Nothing was cared for either. Jacob went straight to the hallway when they came through the door. Not hiding, just off to the side. He stayed there, quiet, watching Callum set Wren's bag down. Watching everything. He didn't step forward. He didn't speak. Then the basket moved. His eyes went to it immediately and stayed there. Wren set Juniper's basket on the kitchen floor and unlatched it without a word. The cat stepped out, paused, then crossed the room and settled into a strip of light near the window. Wren moved to the cupboards. Opened one. Then another, quiet, taking stock. A nearly empty flour tin. 2 cups. 1 chipped. She set a pot on the stove. Added water. Something simple. No announcement. No asking. She did not have to wait long. The kitchen door creaked. Jacob sat cross-legged on the floor, Juniper already in his lap. His hand moved slowly along her back. Careful, steady. He didn't look up, but his focus was absolute. The intense, quiet concentration of someone pretending not to care. Wren set down what she was holding and kept working around them. She didn't comment. Didn't make it a moment. But she was smiling slightly, turned just enough that he couldn't see. The days that followed did not go smoothly. She had not expected them to. Jacob left every room she entered. Not rudely, he simply relocated, taking his drawings and his silence with him, reassembling himself somewhere she wasn't. Juniper followed Jacob. Wren let this happen without reaction, without hurt, without adjusting her presence to accommodate his absence. She was still there. That was the whole point. She narrated her work sometimes, the way she used to with Edgar, who could not always hear her but liked the sound of her voice filling the room. She talked about what she was cooking, what she was mending, what she had noticed about the garden. Jacob sat in the hallway one afternoon and did not enter and did not leave. She did not acknowledge that she knew he was there. Progress, she was learning, did not always look like progress. Then the pot fell. She was reaching for the cast iron from the high shelf and it came down hard, an enormous crash that filled the kitchen and bounced off every wall. She spun around. Jacob was rigid, standing in the doorway where he had been drifting closer for the past 10 minutes. His body had gone completely still in a different way than his usual stillness. Locked, eyes gone somewhere far away, his hands pressed flat against his thighs. He was here but he was not here. She recognized it the way she had recognized his breathing at the market. Edgar had gone to this same place sometimes. A loud sound, a sudden crash, and he would be gone behind his eyes while his body stayed in the room. The worst thing, the thing she had learned at great cost over years, was to pull someone back before the wave had passed. Ren sat down on the kitchen floor. Not beside him, near him. Far enough. She picked up a bowl of peas she had been meaning to shell and began shelling them into her apron. Completely ordinary. Completely unhurried. Like sitting on kitchen floors was simply something she did. Callum came in from the field 20 minutes later. Stopped in the doorway. Read the room in one look. Ren on the floor with her peas, Jacob still rigid in the corner, the fallen pot still lying where it had landed. He did not speak. Did not intervene. He stood in the doorway and waited alongside her. 30 minutes after the crash, Jacob blinked. His hands loosened against his thighs. He looked at Ren on the floor with her nearly finished bowl of peas. She looked up at him. Nearly done. Are you hungry? He went upstairs. But he came back first. That was the whole thing, he came back. How did you know to just sit there? My husband came back from the war carrying something nobody had a name for. The world was too loud in ways other people couldn't hear. I spent 4 years learning to sit with someone who went somewhere I could not follow. She looked at her hands. The worst thing anyone could do was reach for him before he was ready to come back. A long silence. I always reached for him, Callum said. He said it to the table. Not to her. She did not answer. She received everything in it and said nothing and let it be what it was. She found the drawings wall 3 days later. She had entered Jacob's room to clean. He was in the barn, his absence making a kind of permission. She stopped just inside the door. Every inch of the wall. Covered. Sequential drawings running from left to right, floor to ceiling, a story told in pencil by a child who had no other way to tell it. She read them slowly, following the sequence like pages in a book. Eleanor. A woman's face drawn over and over from a child's memory, softer each time, the way remembered faces become softer with distance. Her illness. A bed. A small boy sitting beside it. The boy's mouth open. He was singing, she understood, though there was no sound in any drawing. Just the open mouth and the woman's eyes on him and her hand in his. Then the empty bed. Then the boy alone. At the very end of the sequence the drawing stopped. Blank wall space. As if the story had simply run out of things to say. Ren stood in front of the empty space for a long time. That evening she told Callum quietly, he has been talking this whole time. Everything he cannot say is on that wall. Callum looked at his coffee cup. I know. Do you look at them? A pause that answered before he did. I stopped being able to. She said nothing, but she understood everything in it. A father and a son, both fluent in silence, neither able to read the others. She went back to the wall that night alone. Read it again from the beginning. Stood in front of the empty space at the end. Said quietly, to the room not performing, just the truth-finding air. She heard every word you ever sang to her. Every single one. In the hallway, just outside the door, Jacob stood with his back against the wall. He had heard everything. She did not know. Some weeks had passed. The ranch had found a different rhythm now, not mechanical survival, but something warmer, the way a house changed when someone in it started living rather than just continuing. Callum noticed it before he could name it. The kitchen smelled like something in the mornings. Jacob came downstairs instead of appearing at the edges of rooms. Small things. Enough things. He noticed the way she moved through his ranch like she was learning it, a language she intended to keep. He found reasons to be in the kitchen more than the work required. The drawings started appearing on the table. Not given, left. Jacob understood the difference. Giving required exchange, required the terrifying weight of response. Leaving was safer. He would place a drawing on the table before anyone else was down and be elsewhere by the time it was found. Wren never commented directly. She would find it, look at it quietly, and leave something small beside it. A biscuit. A smooth stone from the yard. A sprig from the garden. No words. No expectation. Jacob watched from doorways, learning that she knew how to receive things without turning them into more than they were. He began to trust the table. One morning she dropped an egg in the yard and made a face at herself, a small private expression of exasperation. She heard something and turned. Jacob was 6 feet away. The corners of his mouth. The brightness around his eyes. There for less than 2 seconds and then gone, replaced by his careful stillness. Wren turned back before he could know she had seen it. She protected that moment the way you protected something that broke if you looked at it directly. After a few days, she was at the general store when she heard Mrs. Hargrove's voice carrying deliberately across the room. Still at the Hale Ranch? I suppose a woman of her stature takes what she can get. Though what exactly Callum Hale needs from a woman like that he couldn't find elsewhere. The other women didn't finish the thought. The mockery sat in the air like something rotting. Wren paid for her supplies, her back straight, her hands steady. The storekeeper added an extra measure of flour to her order without comment. A small, quiet act of decency that cost him nothing and meant everything. She sat in the wagon outside the ranch gate before going in. Just held the reins. Let the road be quiet around her. Callum came out. He looked at her face. Looked at the supplies. You were gone longer than usual. Road was slow, she said. Got down. Carried the supplies in. That evening he mended the kitchen chair that had been wobbling for 2 months. Said nothing. Just fixed it and left it at the table like it had always been that way. She noticed. Said nothing either. You've never saddled a horse before, Callum said one morning. Not correctly, she admitted. He stepped beside her without another word. Took her hands and placed them where they needed to be, adjusting the cinch, his voice quiet at her shoulder. He was close the way a teacher is close. Like that. She was very aware of him not moving away yet. Like that, she repeated. He stepped back. Went about his morning. She stood with her hands still in the position he had placed them. At supper he looked up from his plate. How did you lose him? She didn't flinch at the directness. Farming accident. 14 months ago. It was fast. He nodded. Kept listening. Didn't fill the space with sorry or the way people usually did. She appreciated that enough to ask back. How have you managed alone? He considered it honestly. Poorly at first. And now? Adequately. She laughed, a real one, surprised out of her. He almost smiled. The almost was enough. It was the first meal that felt like a meal rather than 3 people eating in the same room. She was pulling weeds when she heard small feet on the path behind her. Jacob had come looking for her. He was holding something small and worn. A blue hair ribbon, kept with the careful attention of something handled many times over a very long time. He held it out. Wren took it with both hands. She sounds like she was beautiful. Not a question. Just receiving what he was offering and giving it back as truth. They stayed in the dirt a long time. Nobody spoke. The morning moved around them. That evening Callum told her quietly, that ribbon was in his hand the day she died. He has never let anyone touch it. Wren excused herself to the garden and stood there with her hand over her mouth until she was steady. When she came back inside, Callum was still at the table. He looked at her face and looked away and said nothing, and that was exactly right. A few mornings later she pulled on her coat. "I am going to visit someone I lost. You can come if you want." She walked and he followed. At Edgar's grave she talked the way she always did, about the biscuits, about the calf that finally ate, about Juniper stealing Jacob's pencils. Small real things. Grief that had learned to breathe. Jacob watched her, then walked 10 feet further, to Eleanor's grave. He stood for a long time, then knelt, placing his hand flat on the earth. Wren did not move toward him, did not make it into anything other than what it was, a boy returning to his mother in the only way still available to him. They walked home without speaking. Somewhere along the path his hand found hers, barely, 1 second, the lightest possible touch, and then gone. She did not reach after it. It was enough. It was everything. That evening she told Callum. He went very still. He went there. He knelt, she said quietly. Callum sat and put his face in his hands. The first time she had seen him break fully and quietly the way people broke when something they had stopped hoping for came back. She did not fill it with words. She put coffee in front of him and stayed in the silence with him. He looked up after a long time. "Thank you." Not for the coffee. After that evening something between them settled. Not named, just different, easier. "You watch the sunset every evening," he noticed. "Edgar and I used to watch it," she said. It was the one time of day he was always quiet for the right reasons. Callum was quiet for a moment. Eleanor used to say the day wasn't finished until the light went off the west field. "Come on then." They sat on the porch and watched the gold go down and did not talk very much and did not need to. When it faded, Callum said her name, just her name, nothing attached to it, and she turned. "Same time tomorrow?" "Same time tomorrow," she said. And they were. Some mornings she was at the barn before him. One Friday the steps were wet. She slipped. His hand was at her waist before she finished falling. Her hand landed on his chest. Both of them still. One beat that lasted longer than it should have. "Careful," he said. "I am." Neither was talking about the steps. He did not move his hand immediately. She did not step back. Then the ordinary Friday afternoon continued and neither mentioned it. Not that evening. Not ever. Dr. Aldridge arrived on a Tuesday. Mrs. Hargrove had gone to him formally. He examined Jacob while Callum watched, speaking about the boy as if he were a subject rather than a participant. Callum's voice was quiet and final. "2 years ago you told me to stop expecting anything from my son. In the weeks since this woman arrived, he has drawn a living person. He surrendered his mother's ribbon, visited her grave and knelt. I will take her few weeks over your 2 years, doctor." Aldridge turned at the door. "When she leaves, and she will, that child suffers a second abandonment. You are building him up for a greater fall. When she leaves." Callum stood in the empty kitchen and could not stop hearing it. The county judge's letter arrived on a Thursday morning. Callum read it at the kitchen table while Wren was in the garden and Jacob was in the barn. He read it twice, folded it, sat with it. That evening he told her, quietly. Mrs. Hargrove went to the county judge, filed a formal concern about Jacob's welfare. Unqualified person conducting what she is calling medical intervention on a minor. He paused. The judge is coming to assess the situation in 30 days. If he is not satisfied with what he finds, he has the authority to enforce Aldridge's facility recommendation. Wren looked at him across the table. 30 days, she said. Yes. She looked at her hands, then back at him. He already started, Callum. 30 days is more than enough. Something moved in his face that she didn't have a name for yet. He nodded and went back to his coffee, and the evening continued, and she thought nothing more of it. She did not know that upstairs later he sat on the edge of his bed with Aldridge's voice running in the back of his mind like water under ice. When she leaves. It started small. The way these things always started. He was on the porch the next evening at 5 o'clock. She came out and he was there but somewhere else behind his eyes. Present in his body, gone from the conversation. She talked about the garden. He answered correctly. None of it was there. She noticed. Said nothing. The evening after that the porch was empty. She sat alone and watched the light go down and told herself it meant nothing. He was a busy man. A working ranch did not stop for sunsets. She went inside and heard him move through the house without stopping in the kitchen the way he had been stopping. She kept her back to the doorway and her hands busy and her face easy. When the world decided to withdraw, the dignified thing was not to chase it. The conversations changed. Not gone. He was never unkind, never cold, nothing that could be named or confronted. But the warmth that had been building naturally over weeks had developed a careful quality. Correct distance. She tried once. You seem far away lately. Long days, he said. North pasture before winter. She nodded. Did not try again. What she concluded, alone in her room that night, and the nights after, was that the judge's letter had finally done its work. That the 30-day assessment had made Callum look at what she was doing with clear practical eyes and find it insufficient. That he was already preparing. Creating distance to soften Jacob's eventual loss. She was not angry. She understood it. A father protecting his son the only way available. But it settled in her chest like Mrs. Hargrove's voice in the store had settled, like a splinter working deeper with every day that passed. Jacob noticed. Children who had learned to read rooms noticed everything. He watched his father's careful distance and Wren's steady face and the empty porch at 5 o'clock, and he drew none of it but carried all of it. He began appearing beside Wren more. She found him waiting on the bottom step before dawn one morning, juniper in his lap, not asking for anything. Just there. She made 2 cups of something warm and sat beside him, and they watched the ranch come into the morning together. He leaned his shoulder against her arm. Just slightly. Just enough. She looked straight ahead. Kept her face easy. She made the decision on a Sunday night. Not from anger. From something more honest and more painful. She sat at the kitchen table after the house was asleep and thought about the judge's letter the way she had been trying not to. About what it meant that someone had gone to the trouble of filing a formal concern. About the word unqualified sitting in the middle of it like a stone. What if it was true? Not about her methods, not about Jacob's capacity, but about the attachment itself. What if she had become the ceiling instead of the door? What if leaving cleanly now, before the judge arrived, before it became a removal rather than a departure, was the most loving thing available? She sat with it honestly, the way she sat with hard things. And beneath all the careful reasoning, beneath everything, was the simpler thing she would not say aloud even to herself. The porch at 5 o'clock. The way he had said her name once with nothing attached and everything attached. That had felt like something and apparently had not been. She was not going to stay in a house where a door was closing on her. She had too much dignity for that. Before dawn. Kitchen left immaculate. Garden notes on the table. For Callum, 1 folded note. Check the drawings. There are words in the margins. You have more than you know. You always did. So does he. For Jacob, her small journal, slid under his door. Every day 1 true sentence about him. He organizes his pencils by color before he begins, always. He saves the heel of bread until the very end of every meal. He tilted his head when the horses ran this morning. Like he was hearing music in it. He gave me Eleanor's ribbon. I understood what that cost him. I hope he knows I did. He is not broken. He never was. He was waiting for someone to learn his language. You have so many words inside you. I heard every one. She picked up Juniper's basket. Picked up her bag. Walked to the door. Put her hand on it. Stood there. Kept walking. At the oak she stopped. Hand on the bark. Looked back at the dark house once. dark and solid and quiet, the way it had been the morning she arrived. Then she turned and kept walking down the road until the house was gone behind her. The road was empty in both directions. Just her and the dark and the sound of her own footsteps going forward. Inside the house, upstairs, a boy who always woke early was already awake. He found the journal before he found anything else. Read every word. Then went to the window. She was at the oak tree. Her hand on the bark. Then turning. Then walking. He went to his drawings wall. Took every drawing down carefully. Placed them in a pile on the floor. Sat in the bare room with the journal open in his hands. Juniper was gone. She had taken Juniper. The room was completely silent, but differently silent from 3 years ago. Not absence. A held breath. Callum found him 20 minutes later. Bare walls. Jacob on the floor. The journal open. He read his note from the kitchen table. Then read it again. Checked the drawings. Sat on the floor beside his son and went through the pile one by one. His son's handwriting in the corners. Small, careful, hidden. Words nobody had known were there. At the bottom of the pile, the drawing of the woman at the stove, her braid. Her particular way of standing. In the margin in Jacob's careful hand, she stays. Present tense. A belief held for weeks. He was on his feet and out the door before he finished deciding to move. She had not gone far. Sitting under the tree just past the oak. Bag heavy. Juniper escaped from the basket into her lap. She could not make herself go further and was not ready to ask herself why. She heard him before she saw him. Fast boots on the dry road that slowed and then stopped. He sat down beside her on the ground. Not across from her. Beside her. She looked at him then. He held out the drawing. Pointed to the corner. She stays. He believed that, Callum said. His voice was not steady. Before I made him doubt it. That was me. I heard Aldridge say when she leaves and I started. He stopped. I do that. I manage the ending before it arrives. I've done it with everything since Eleanor. I start creating the distance before the loss comes so that when it comes I am already somewhere it can't reach me. She looked at the drawing in his hands. I mended that east fence the day after you mentioned it. I have not done one thing right in 3 years that wasn't because of something you said or showed me. And then I made you feel like none of it was enough. He paused. That was not about you. That was me being a coward about something I didn't know how to protect without destroying first. He looked at her directly. I am not asking you to come back for Jacob. I am asking you to come back because this ranch has been a place people survive in for 3 years and for the past weeks it has been a place people live in. That is entirely because of you. And I noticed. Every single day I noticed. And I was too afraid of losing it to say so and I let you walk out that gate instead. The road was quiet. Juniper shifted in her lap. You're going to have to do better than this, Wren said. I know. Starting tonight. That porch. 5 o'clock. I'll be there. She looked at him a long moment. Then looked down at Juniper. The garden needs watering, she said. She stood. He picked up her bag. Started back up the road. He walked beside her. Their hands not touching. Almost. At the oak she put her hand on the bark as she passed. He understood. She had been saying goodbye to it that morning. She had meant to keep walking. He kept pace beside her and said nothing because there was nothing to say that the walking wasn't already saying. Jacob saw them from his window. 2 figures walking up the road side by side. That he looked at the journal in his lap, then at the empty walls, and back to the window. He picked up one drawing, walked downstairs, and stood on the porch in the morning cold, bare feet on the wood, the paper held against his chest. Wren saw him at the gate. She and Callum slowed, neither spoke, walking the rest of the way as you walk towards something you are afraid to disturb. Steadily, carefully, without looking away. Jacob looked at his father. It was the look of a child who had finally found the place to set down 3 years of silence. Eleanor's ribbon. The bare walls. The journal. All of it passing between them in the space of a breath. Then barely a whisper. Papa, don't let her go. First words in 3 years. Spent entirely on someone else. Callum's legs went. He dropped to his knees, taking his son's face in both hands, looking at him without the careful distance of a man managing his own grief. Papa hears you, his voice broke on it. Papa has always heard you. The question from the morning Eleanor died, Papa, she stopped listening, was finally answered. Jacob placed a hand against his father's face. Slow, deliberate. His first initiated touch in 3 years. Wren sat on the bottom step and put her face in her hands. Juniper jumped from her arms and sat at Jacob's feet with the authority of a cat who had arranged the entire result and was satisfied with it. Jacob held out the drawing. Eleanor, and beside her, a woman at a stove with a braid and a particular way of standing. Drawn together, side by side as if they had always belonged in the same story. Wren pressed it to her chest and looked at the sky for a moment. They sat on the floor of the bare room, the 3 of them. Jacob handed drawings one by one. Callum and Wren pinned them back. Callum read the margin words aloud as he found them, the small hidden sentences his son had been writing in corners for weeks. Jacob sat cross-legged and listened to his own language spoken out loud for the very first time. When the wall was full, Jacob surveyed it slowly. Eleanor's illness, the singing, the empty bed, the boy alone, and now at the end, Wren at the stove. Both of them on the same page. He nodded, satisfied. Then picked up his pencil and drew while they watched. 3 figures, the ranch, morning light coming from the east. When he finished, he sat back and looked at it once. In the corner in his careful hand, 2 words. She stayed. Callum looked at those 2 words for a long time. Then looked at Wren beside him on the floor. She was already looking at him. Neither spoke. There was nothing left that words needed to do. The county judge arrived 30 days later. Callum read from Wren's journal. The judge walked the length of the wall slowly, stopped at she stayed, and left without requiring anything further. The petition was dismissed. The following Sunday at church, Wren and Callum arrived together. Jacob between them. After the service, Mrs. Hargrove approached. Jacob looked up at her, sustained direct eye contact she wasn't prepared for. His gaze did not move. Your son was unkind to me. 6 words placed with complete precision. The churchyard went quiet. Callum and Wren did not intervene. They let the words stand exactly where Jacob had placed them. Mrs. Hargrove looked at Everett. He was staring at the ground, something working in his face, not quite apology, not quite understanding. The beginning of both. She left without speaking. Jacob looked up at Wren. She looked back at him. Nothing needed to be said. That evening, the porch. The 5 o'clock gold on the western field, last of it, fading slow. Callum was already there when she came out. He took her hand, just held it. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. She turned her palm over and held his back. They watched the light go down together. They married quietly at the ranch some weeks later. Just the 3 of them and the preacher and Juniper sitting on the fence post throughout, entirely satisfied with the arrangement. Jacob speaks in sentences now. Not always. Not easily. But when he needs the words, they are there. The garden comes in spring. The biscuits are made with exactly the right amount of butter. Outside, the oak at the gate. Under it, a boy, a woman, a cat, a man who learned that hearing someone is not the same as waiting for them to be quiet. All of them home.